how do you know that you are burnt out? It's really hard to figure that out, especially when you're surrounded by other coworkers and even just friends who are all feeling that same thing. And then it just sort of becomes normal. So if you resonate with that, stick around. I've got my lovely clients, Sausha and Jose, and we are going to be talking about how they negotiated, both in totally different industries, a 3-month sabbatical to Europe. And that was without quitting their jobs. So we're going to be talking about all the details of their exciting trip. And they're about to leave in just a couple weeks. So Sausha, Jose, thank you so much for joining me.
Woohoo! We're happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
All right. So I'd love to just introduce yourselves to everybody watching, and let them know a little bit about you, what you're interested in, a little bit of background info, and we can get started.
Okay.
Go ahead. You start off.
Okay. I'm Sausha, and I currently work as a marriage and family therapist at a private practice. We have been in Chicago now for about 5 years. And yeah, I think I'm struggling a little bit, actually a lot of it, with the burnout piece. I love working with all my clients, and I'm so grateful for them. And being a therapist during the height of the pandemic and just post that, and even into that still right now, has been really wearing and taxing on me, in my creativity, and just kind of, like I like to put it, my magic. And so it's been tough. But I'm excited for our sabbatical.
My name's Jose. I work for an international consulting firm. Been there about 5 years now. We've been together, actually, also a little bit more background, 16 years now. So yeah, we're burnout for me looks a little different than burnout for her, because my burnout is hours on the clock, whereas she has things aside from seeing clients that she has to do, on her personal time, essentially.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more so like, clients that are demanding, short timelines, sometimes late nights, things like that.
Yeah.
I definitely relate. So if you are new to me, my name is Susie Chow. And before I got into helping people live abroad for a month, I was also in consulting, and I did that for about 13 years, and definitely can relate to Jose and the demanding clients and projects. And, that does take a toll on you after time, for sure. And also, if you've joined before, you know that this is not my house. It's probably obvious this is a virtual background, but I'm traveling at the moment, also in Chicago. We're not together, but I'm in Chicago just visiting some family and friends. So I would love, if you are watching live or on the replay, just pop in the comments where you're tuning in from. I would love to know that you are with us. There will be time for questions at the end. And again, even if you're catching the replay, definitely pop those questions in the comments, and I can always address those after this. I'll be monitoring that as well, kind of throughout the time. So don't be shy. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and we can go ahead and get started. Well, a little bit more about me now, what I am doing. So Sausha and Jose, they are my clients, and we worked together. We'll share more in this video about the process of working together and how they got from this recognition that, in fact, they are feeling burnt out, and discovering, some options for how to address that. And of course, the option that they chose, because they're here right now, is to take a sabbatical. And that is one of my favorite options for if you are feeling burnt out. I think a sabbatical, specifically to travel, does wonders for your brain, because just simply moving to a new environment, that alone makes such a huge difference in your perspective and your thoughts. And, it triggers more creativity and seeing things in a different way, which is oftentimes what you need to kind of take a step back and realize, okay, what you were doing before led to burnt out. What can you do differently moving forward? So we'll talk a little bit about that. I would love to actually start our conversation to just discover, what was it that, and I remember, Sausha, in one of our first calls, you had mentioned little things, that you weren't doing anymore was one sign that, okay, this is showing me that I'm not myself. Something's off. I'd love to, share a little bit more about that to help people who are watching realize, maybe they can relate to that.
Totally. Yes. Yeah, that was one of the big signs, was the small things they weren't landing in the same way. They weren't bringing me joy in the same way. And so it was really discouraging because I felt like my toolbox just felt like it wasn't accessible in the same way, and it wasn't impacting me in a positive way anymore. And when I say toolbox, I mean just like small things, right? Small mindfulness moments, or moments together, moments with my dog, taking a walk, or enjoying a good cup of like coffee, right? Or just doing things that I like to do, like dancing or listening to music. They still were nice to engage in, of course, but they weren't yielding the same amount of joy. And excuse me. And I also think too, just within myself, feeling and noticing like this disconnect with, like, I already started saying, my magic, right? That's kind of how I phrase it, but that spark within myself felt like it's just, the light started to dim a little bit. And I think it's because of just how much I was working at the height of the pandemic. I think is just like Jose said, I do a lot of behind the scenes work. So my sessions are just a sliver of the pie. And during the height of the pandemic, I was working maybe like 30 client hours, which meant that on the back end, I'm working maybe an additional 15 to 20 to do scheduling and notes and all that. So it really wore on me. And I think beyond that, it wasn't just the work itself, because my clients also give me so much life. It's the admin stuff. And it's also just this overachiever nature in me. And so I was noticing, the burnout, yes, maybe it is partially the job. I also think it's reassessing how I want to have my work-life balance be, because that felt really out of whack. And I was noticing that I was doing way more in terms of work. And then I didn't have much to give to my personal life. And then typically for me too, another sign of burnout is I'm really good at giving to everyone else. So I was able to give here still, and that felt good. I was able to give to my family and my friends, but then I had to look in the mirror and say, like, what am I giving to myself? Are there things on my to-do list that actually bring me joy just for me, not in my marriage, not with my family, not with my friends? And sometimes they kind of cross over, but there wasn't much on my list. And actually there still isn't much on my list. And I think it takes a little bit of more creativity to figure out what new tools I can use. But being burnt out, I didn't have that creativity, and I still feel like I don't. So having time and space is just another piece of it, and noticing what this work-life balance, what I wasn't able to do with this kind of mixed match and imbalanced work life.
Yeah. That you bring up so many very relatable points. And if you're watching live or on the replay, just hit like if you can relate me, the love button if you can relate, because I know I can relate to all of that. And I think for so many people, they think burnout means like physical exhaustion and like more of the physical manifestations of what burnout can cause or lead to, when really the signs that you're talking about, that I mean, I guess if left unchecked, it could probably end up, worse, like in the hospital or something like that. Well, we don't want that to happen. So you were able to recognize, before that point that, things weren't giving you joy, and you were giving so much, and not leaving anything for yourself. And I know so many people can relate to that. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
And I want to talk a little bit about, like, so you saw some of those signs. And then, I mean, I know how we connected, but you can share a little bit about, like, how did you find me, and what was the thing that made you like that seed that was like, maybe a sabbatical is the answer?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I learned so much from my clients, and it was actually from a client that gave your info as a rec in a session. And just because we were kind of talking about burnout in general, and I'm really honest with my clients, Now I'm not having a whole personal therapy session in their therapy session, but I am honest with where I'm at. And so she gave me your information. And then I told him, I said, maybe this would be something we want to consider. And so then we reached out, and I just had that feeling in my gut. And I heard such amazing things from this client about you. And I just was like, okay, I think it would be a good option to explore, not knowing whether we could actually make it a reality, but just we wanted to go down fighting. Yeah, we had been considering. Go ahead.
We'd been considering a move to Europe initially, and exploring the options for that and sort of what that would entail. And just didn't look like it was going to work out, especially with, current state of the economy and that sort of thing. So this was sort of like, okay, this could work, a different opportunity.
That's an interesting point too, that it wasn't just burnout, but it was also a sense of wanting more adventure and big, exciting things, like the positive side of it, and I know it's a little, I guess, clickbaity, supposed to be like burnout, from burnout to break, but it's catchy, right? But for so many of my clients, it's usually a mix of both. It's some level of dissatisfaction. I mean, maybe not like full on burnout, but for so many people, it is more of a life is short. Let's go on adventures and, have these experiences, especially like you guys, like before it's just the two of you, before maybe potentially having a family and taking advantage of an opportunity. So you had been exploring other options. And then obviously your client, Sausha, connected us. So, I think that I really resonated, I think, with where you're at. I mean, when I went on, my year-long around the world trip with my husband, it was pre-kids. And there was an aspect of that where it's like, nothing is tying me down. Why not do this? And there's a whole backstory there, but let's focus on you guys. I want to talk a little bit about how, like the process of us working together and where we started. Because I think that what's so important that most people don't do, even planning a vacation, most people just skip right ahead and say, I want to go here, 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 here. And then they end up with like a crazy itinerary where they're running themselves ragged. I take an approach where I start with identifying goals. And that's really important to me because I think that process alone can make decision-making so much easier when you're clear about, what are the outcomes that you want, especially when it relates to burnout. I would love to, if you guys feel comfortable sharing some of your goals and the things that we kind of talked about that you're really looking forward to achieving in just a couple weeks.
Right. I think going in, we kind of already knew the style of travel we wanted to do, which is not as, new city every couple days, maybe a little more prolonged stays, that sort of thing. We both have family that's pretty well traveled and they do that sort. So we kind of knew what that entails and kind of what that looks like. So when we started off with the goal setting, it was with that in mind, like, what do we want to experience while we're sort of immersed in the various cultures, I think, so for the 3 months, we'll be in 4 different countries, which is, fairly relaxed pace. A few different cities, but, starting off with goal setting kind of helped frame, the route we want to take essentially, and what's most important to, what's going to be most memorable based on, things we like to do in our personal lives.
Yeah. And I also think the pacing of it, right? Where we also, the way that we planned it and where we're going first also meant a lot to us too, because Jose's actually never been to Europe. And so this is also, like you had said, Susie, we're excited to like wander and adventure together and really kind of bring that spark back in our marriage in those ways. And so it is exciting because he loves to cook and explore wine and all of these things too. And so those are definitely top of mind as well as we kind of were looking at where we wanted to go. And we started off, how we're starting off our sabbatical is by going to a place that's familiar to me, because I am the one, I think, that is burnt out in a very core way, in a different way than Jose is. And so for me, familiar breeds safety and comfort. And so starting off in Italy, which is where I studied abroad, is a space where I know and am somewhat familiar with. And so that brought me already a lot of relief and peace. And Jose's just so excited because he's never been. So it worked out for the both of us.
Yeah. Well, what I loved about that decision so much is that I guess I want to back up, like goal setting. When you guys first went through the exercise, I mean, it was like a lot of places, of course, you know, people are excited to travel. That's why we're doing this, right? So it was like a ton of different places, like some more like emotional goals and things like that, or like wanting to learn something or do something. But I think that in the conversation that we had, some light bulbs went off, and like I like you weren't even thinking, or maybe like Florence was like somewhere in the back of your brain, but then like it just, everything connected when we talked, and I was so excited. Specifically, I think recognizing that, as you were just saying, it's a place that I think you can really like settle into. And that's a great way to start an adventure like this, is, you know, to be in that place. But one of the things that I loved is that you're excited to share that with Jose. You know, it's like, it's familiar, which is great, but it's like also you're going to be discovering it in a completely different way because you'll be together and it's all new for him. And, you know, you've got fresh perspective, fresh eyes. And I think, you know, that's going to be just fantastic. So I think the main point I want to say is that goals can be fuzzy, but I think that one of the things that, you know, I love doing and working with clients is like how to take those loose ideas and like put it into a plan. Because that, I think, is the magic in finding and creating an itinerary that's really meaningful, a good pace, again, because you're not planning, you can't travel in the same way that you do for 1 or 2 weeks for, you know, especially for 3 months. So, you know, I think we were already on the same page that like slow travel is the way. And that's definitely what I specialize in. But I'm just so excited about, you know, your itinerary and your plans. And one other thing that I know I mentioned multiple times with you that I want to call out, if you're thinking about doing a sabbatical like this, one question that I know I ask you guys a lot is like, what is something that you wouldn't or couldn't do on a vacation? Like, why is this different? And in taking advantage of like the time and the space, and doing something like you wouldn't go to Florence for a month, you know, maybe sometime in the future, but you know, certain things like that, you know, or maybe an extended cooking class or something like that, that you just couldn't really squeeze into a quick vacation. That's kind of some food for thought. But I would love to get to also one of the things that we worked with and talked about was negotiating your time off, because before we worked together, you didn't have that all sorted out. Like
not for a while.
Being kind of to the wire, but one of the beautiful things, and I know we talked about it, is that there is something about just making the decision and then like things kind of like line up because you have those intentions and the clarity that this is what you're doing. And then, you know, if you have that clarity, then things can fall into place. And I would love for you to share kind of both of your stories. Again, clearly you're in totally different industries, different types of jobs. And I know a lot of people watching are probably thinking, there's no way I would get a 3-month sabbatical approved, but yeah,
totally.
So, I mean, from my side, I was fortunate enough that my company has a sabbatical program to start. You know, not every company has that. It's not something that a lot of people I know have utilized, to be honest, because in our industry, I guess, or your former industry, it's I don't want to say frowned upon, but it is something that sort of leaves a mark of like, you know, you're probably not getting promoted this year, you know, because you're taking extended time away, which is fine. So that's something to consider. But for me, luckily, it's something that's it's paid. You know, I do get a portion of my salary while we're gone, so that helps things a lot. It's it's kind of wild, to be honest with you. The process started by me just bringing it up with, you know, my manager, the person that's responsible for my schedule. and then actually taking advantage of the steps that you provided. So,
Yes.
creating a transition plan, making
Mhm.
sure that there are steps to sort of solidify that this isn't like a spur of the moment thing,
Mhm.
making
Mhm.
sure that I have the firm in mind, and
Mhm.
how I'll
Yeah.
make things easier for my team.
Mhm.
Approaching it from that perspective of, this will benefit you as well as me
Mhm.
is really, really key. And, for my industry, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to pause right
Yeah.
there that for people watching, just go check your policies
Right.
because honestly, if it's a situation like Jose's where policy exists, but you don't know anybody who has taken advantage of that, or especially to do something like elective sabbatical to travel, then you may be surprised to see that there are, some fine print in there that it is a
Mhm.
policy. It's just something that you have to be the one to raise your hand and
Mhm.
ask for it.
Mhm.
Because there are definitely a lot of companies that have, paid or unpaid sabbatical programs, but it's just not known because the culture isn't supporting that and making it widely known. So you may be surprised at what you find. Can't hurt to take a look.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm. And then from my perspective, we were kind of waiting on his side because we wanted our dream was to do it together, right? He could take a sabbatical by himself. I could take one by myself. But the whole goal was it for it to be together. And so once we finally, after a lot of work for
Yeah.
you and then just lots of things within the company and all that, we got that clearance. And like you said, Susie, it was pretty down to the wire. But at that point, I had done a lot of research in terms of my work policy and if there's extended leaves and things like that, which there is. It just needs to be, there's a meeting required, needs to be discussed. And then also just looking into and reading blogs about therapists who have done sabbaticals or taken extended leaves and how that might be, how I might frame it, how I might frame it with clients, because that is what I was most nervous about. As we all know earlier, I was talking about being a caregiver, right? And really deeply caring and sometimes at the detriment of myself. So I think I needed to do that research to feel like it was okay to give myself this break. And so it actually was really easy because I feel like I went in with a mindset of, I'm doing this as opposed to can I do this? And
Yeah.
how can we make this
Right.
work? And that was a significant shift in my mind, which I think you really provided that sense of empowerment to both of us, given all the tools you have, given our meetings and all of that, and the anchors of what's the goal, what's the hope, and living in this way is just not sustainable. So also remembering that, and yeah, just having those tough conversations, which it was it was hard, and yet I was met with a lot of support, which I was really grateful for. I was just nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I remember asking for my year-long leave of absence, and I shared that with you guys. I was like, I was so nervous, but the response was like, okay, we'll just do X, Y, Z, fill out this paper.
Mhm.
And I was like, I had built it up into my head to be this huge thing, and you're just
Mhm.
telling me I have to like do some paperwork, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I gave plenty of notice, but I think one of the things that I shared with you guys to reframe is that if you are a good employee, assuming you are a good
Mhm.
employee, and I'm sure everybody watching is a good employee, um,
Absolutely.
companies want to keep you. It's so
Mhm.
expensive. A friend of mine he's got a medium-sized company. I just posted on LinkedIn about this. He said that for every employee that leaves, it costs the company $78,000. And I'm sure, that number will vary, but it's a huge number if you consider all the costs of potential backfill and then recruiting and interviewing
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
onboarding the new person, maybe
Right.
even
Yeah.
having to rehire. Like, companies do not want good employees to walk out the door. And if
Mm-mm.
you are coming and you're saying, I need a break, whether that's, truly like a burnout, and they're at that point, they're probably not being very productive anyway, or
Mhm.
more of an elective, like, I want to take advantage of this really cool
Yeah.
opportunity. And, potentially I'm ready to walk out the door. If you don't say yes, then I think companies will like make it happen. And that's just such a shift for so many people, to think about it from the employer's shoes. And that's where, Jose, like in what were you both saying is creating that proposal that's a win-win and taking their side into account and saying, I don't want to leave you high and dry. Like, I want to go and do this, but I want to help you with the plan, and I'm here to support this. You're not just saying, peace out. I want a really long vacation. Like, that's not what this is.
Right.
And so I think that reframe is so important for so many people to get the courage. And Sausha, what you were saying, it's ultimately comes down to giving yourself permission.
And at the end of the day, sabbaticals are a retention tool anyway, so that's
right.
There's a reason why they're being offered.
Totally. So excellent. So you guys are about ready for your departure. You're leaving in like just less than 2 weeks. How are you feeling? I want to just share all of the excitement with everybody.
It's a crazy feeling. It's starting to feel more real because we're like making restaurant reservations, think it's that close now. It's not just the stay or the flight, things that are kind of more abstract, So that's a lot of fun. Today is actually a week out from my last day at my job. Or, not last day, but last day for a while.
So exciting.
But yeah, the excitement's really starting to settle in. We're looking at like the weather.
Like it's close to, like you could figure out what like that's when it's real. I mean, for me anyway, it's not really real until I'm physically on the plane, but I love that excitement. And before we went live, we were talking about packing, and they're trying it, you guys, for anybody watching, they're trying to do carry-on, which I am all about. Which probably for most people sounds crazy for a 3-month trip.
Right.
But the thing is, there's laundry everywhere in the world. And a lot of the places that you're staying, they will have laundry facilities. So you don't have to pack. In fact, it's better to not pack. And I provide packing lists and all of that. But I think that it's just really exciting when you get down to like the nitty gritty, and it's getting real.
Yeah, it's getting so real. And I also think like in the midst of the excitement I kind of keep phrasing, like I feel kind of a little bit like a chicken without a head because there's so many logistics, there's so much going on. But I do think the tools that you provide offer those anchors, right? So it's like there's a home for it to live as opposed to just living in here, which for my type A brain is like super helpful and wonderful. Because with closing down work for me, it looks a lot different than for him. And I have a lot more humans I'm interacting with and trying to figure out like coverage and all that. And so making sure all of our paperwork is up to date and everything's closed out. And so it's exciting, and it is at times a little overwhelming because it's exciting and it's a lot. There's a lot going on. So we really need this break.
Yes. Well, that is a good call out to and again, anybody not familiar with my service, it's really full service in terms of not just the travel planning, but also like the full preparation. And clearly what we're talking about and helping with the like negotiation for getting the time off of work down to packing lists and, really preparing personally, what do you do about your mail? Things like that, professionally, financially, making sure those ducks are all in a row. And mentally too. So it's not just the travel, because I know personally having, taken a year-long break, as I mentioned, but also multiple 1-month breaks, sabbaticals, it's a different thing altogether to prepare for a longer trip. And so that's really important to me to like have that packaging to really provide the tools and everything that is needed to feel confident and comfortable and excited for departure. So I'd love to kind of close out with like, what are you most excited about, like an experience or just in general, like what are you looking forward to the most?
I think the thing that keeps coming to my mind is just like wandering together, like just wandering around and just exploring, like not having to have that regimented routine in that way, just being able to Yeah, I don't know, enjoy the small things again together. That's what I'm looking forward to the most.
That's tough. It's tough to follow. Personally, mine are a little more tangible.
Yeah.
So like I'm really looking forward to taking cooking classes. Like Sasha mentioned, I love to cook. So learning, traditional French techniques and Italian pasta making and sauces. That's right up my alley. It's exactly what I've always wanted to do. So it's very cool.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, last call for any questions in the comments. Again, if you're watching the replay, you can still pop those questions in and I will get to them after the fact. But I do want to close out and just let you know that if you are thinking, even contemplating taking a sabbatical, I would love to talk with you. So just depending on where you're watching, just send me a DM. Or you can visit my website, carpedmtraveler.com. And I would love to hop on a call. We can talk about your specific situation because everybody's totally different. But I would love to have that conversation again, totally complimentary to just discover if we're a good fit to work together. So please reach out. Sausha, Jose, thank you so much for joining. I would love. Maybe we can do something after you return home. You can share all your fun stories.
Yes, we would love to do that.
Hopefully keep in touch. Looking forward to following along your adventures abroad.
Thank you. And thank you for everything. It's been so helpful and so needed. So we appreciate you so much.
So helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you everybody for watching. Until next time. Bye.